Since the release of Wargroove, I have been playing a literal crap ton of this game, most of it spent online duking it out against other players. I'm by no means claiming to be an expert, as most people are still in the process of figuring this game out, but I'd like to think that I've gained enough of an understanding about the way this game functions to the point where I've started to see a bunch of very common beginner mistakes that nearly every player I encounter online tends to make. Resisting the temptation to name this video Wargroove Pitfalls, I decided to list some very common Wargroove beginner mistakes for you all. Mistake number 1. Using your commander as a glorified capture bot. Your commander is a ridiculously strong unit that can one-shot infantry and really apply pressure to your opponents. Yes, they can also capture properties, but so can your regular swordsmen. In multiplayer matches, I see a lot of players use their commanders to merely walk around the map, capturing things far away from the conflicts. Why use a super strong combat unit to perform this job? Send your commander into the center of the map where they are the most needed, not away from the action. They aren't much good for you on the other side of the map, taking over some random village nobody cares about. Sure, if there is a village on the way in the direction they are already headed, you should capture it, of course. But if possible, you should always have an infantry unit nearby to do it instead, so your commander can spend their time attacking your opponents and thus inflicting pressure. Mistake number 2. Not finishing off weak units with your commander. Another beginner mistake I see is players not using their commanders to kill off weakened units when they are clearly able to. The best way to charge up your power in Wargroove is to kill stuff, and a great way of doing this is to finish off weakened units. If you have the choice between killing an enemy unit with one of your own or your commander, there is almost never a reason not to use your commander. You really want that groove charge. Mistake number 3. Being overly afraid of using your commander. It really sucks to have a game basically won only to suddenly get your commander killed due to being careless and overextending. This experience can make most people afraid to utilize their commanders to their fullest, having them idle in the rear lines away from the action. While I see some beginners making the mistake of playing way too recklessly, a much more common mistake I see are people holding their commanders back out of fear that they might get killed, treating them like their king in a game of chess. In Wargroove, you need to familiarize yourself with the damage values of each unit and memorize how much punishment your commander can take before falling. If you know that the enemy do not have the firepower to kill off your commander this turn, you can easily place him or her on the front lines to bait out their attacks. Granted, you have an option to safely retreat and reinforce afterwards. Baiting out your opponent into wasting a bunch of their units on your commander when they can't finish the job is actually a move that can often end up winning you the game. Mistake number 4. Not utilizing wagon movements. Wagons are fantastic utility units that can get your infantry to where they need to be, which is incredibly valuable. But most people don't utilize their wagons effectively, meaning they don't take into account the movement of the unit they drop off. Allow me to demonstrate. If you're going to be using a wagon to transport an infantry with the purposes of capturing this specific village, there's no point in dropping the infantry off directly adjacent to the village. Instead, you should drop the infantry off just within movement range of the village. The unit will still reach its original destination at the same pace next turn, and the wagon will be closer to its original spot so it can pick up another unit faster. Another example of how most players limit the movement of their wagons: let's say you are sending this wagon back to pick up an infantry unit. What most players would do is move it like this and then load the infantry into the wagon. Why? Move your infantry first, then position your wagon within range so that the infantry can be loaded in next turn. With this example, your movement range will be greatly increased, because you also take into account the movement of the infantry unit itself. Also keep in mind that wagons can transport your commander as well as your dogs. Wagons are also great for blocking off enemy units and choke points, so try to utilize them to their fullest potential whenever possible. Mistake number 5. Not rushing contested villages. On any given map, there are usually a few contested villages located in the center. This means properties that will be the main conflict of the game, and whoever takes them first usually wins. Villages next to your stronghold or far out of the way are called uncontested villages because they'll be captured and then mostly left alone for the duration of the match. For this reason, you should always rush for the contested villages first and leave the uncontested villages for lasts. Mistake number 6. Not paying attention to changing weather. Weather is absolute key in Wargroove. You can view tomorrow's weather by looking at the top right corner of your screen. Severe weather slows certain units down and reduces their range, while windy weather speeds certain units up and increases their range. Neglecting the weather can easily lose you the game. Lining up a push to correspond with tomorrow's weather is absolute key. If your opponent has a wall of indirect units lined up, pushing when the severe weather is about to reduce their range can be a winning maneuver. Mistake number 7. Going for critical hits regardless of circumstances. Critical hits are a very fun mechanic in Wargroove, and once you realize you can perform one, it's often very hard to avoid the temptation of charging into battle. See an enemy infantry unit at max range away from one of your knights? You can easily wipe them out in one hit, and that is really satisfying. But that infantry unit is worth 100 gold to your knight's 600, and might also bring the knights into range of something dangerous. Is it really worth it to perform that charge despite it being a crit? Crits are great, but a bit of extra damage isn't a reason to suicide your valuable unit, so don't get carried away just because you see big numbers on your screen. Mistake number 8. Not utilizing all your barracks. In Wargroove, the number of bases you have to deploy ground units is very low. Usually you only start with a single barracks, with one more being able to be captured somewhere on the map. I think the developers of Wargroove intentionally designed the maps this way to prevent you from spamming weak units, because they know how good of a strategy it is. If you do have multiple barracks available, it is usually a very smart idea to always have them build something, even if it means spreading out your gold. In general, having multiple weak units is better than having a single strong one, because it allows you more flexibility and gives you more map control, which in turn allows you to capture properties and win the war of attrition by simply having more income than your opponents. Yet, a very common mistake I see in multiplayer games is a lot of players pooling all their gold into a single strong unit like a knight or a golem and leaving their spare barracks unused. While there are some circumstances where a single strong unit can get the job done better than multiple weak ones, I generally win matches by overwhelming my opponents with sheer numbers. Sure, a golem is a powerful unit and a good way of breaking through a heavily defended choke point, but it can only be in one place at once. I'd rather have that gold be spread out among multiple units. Instead of a knight worth 600, I generally go for a ranger and a swordsman for the same price. Though, of course, there are exceptions to this rule. Sometimes a knight is just straight up a better choice. But in general, I always try to make sure that my barracks are always being used for something and not left idle. Mistake number 9. Ignoring mermen on sea maps. In the Advanced Wars games, naval combat was a rare niche, seldom seen and often overlooked. This was due to ships being extremely overpriced for what they could do, and the fact that there just wasn't anything to fight over at sea. In Wargroove, however, naval combat is more important than ever. Most sea maps have exclusive water villages that can only be captured by mermen, and yet on a lot of these maps, I see a lot of players neglecting to build these units with their harbors. This is a huge mistake. Not only are those water villages extremely important for your income, but mermen are fantastic combat units, capable of harassing land units from the sea with their ranged attacks. They are extremely versatile units, and if you play on a map where you begin with a harbor, you should definitely always hire mermen for at least the first 3 or 4 days. Mistake number 10. Rushing dragons. I might be making a mistake with this entry, seeing as it's difficult to predict how the metagame will evolve over time. Hell, maybe dragon rushes will be like one of the most effective strategies in certain circumstances, but based on what I've seen so far in multiplayer, unless you are playing Fog of War and can really get the jump on your opponents, dragon rushing is usually incredibly bad, because you are basically signaling to your opponent that you just poured a heap of gold into a single unit that can be hard countered by another unit almost half its price. Dragons are late-game powerhouses that are far from weak, and great for breaking stalemates, burning villages, and overpowering your opposition when there's large armies on both sides. But don't think rushing out one early will win you the game, because usually it does quite the opposite. You need to spend that money on units that can capture properties and apply pressure in contested areas, and dragons just aren't good for that, seeing as they can be zoned out by a witch or harpy and become completely worthless as a result. Now, it needs to be said that some of these mistakes could change if the Wargroove development team makes radical changes to how the game works in a future patch, but I still believe that most, if not all of these points will remain relevant and valid in multiplayer for a long time to come, because many of them also apply to Advanced Wars, which is pretty much what this game is based on, so I'm confident this video won't be rendered obsolete, or at the very least, I hope so. So, do you know any common Wargroove beginner mistakes that people frequently make? Let me know about them in the comment section below. If I get enough of them, I might make a sequel to this video, or maybe even make it a series. Smash the like button and subscribe for more Wargroove content. My name is Mermen, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye!